where the truth don't miss, no spin, no script, just real talk with Chris. Cut the noise, break the mold, say the things they won't be told. Straight no chaser, no disguise, only truth behind these mics.
So Jeffrey Sachs here is going to take us back to the actual beginning of this conflict that we're seeing in Iran right here, and it'll make sense why we're doing what we're doing in Iran, at least from a American perspective, which is basically piracy at this point.
And when he uttered that thought that maybe Iran's oil belonged to Iran, immediately the British Empire, in the form of MI6, came to the new ascendant American empire in the guise of the CIA and said, we got to overthrow this guy, which of course they did successfully. They made what today we would call a color revolution. They stirred up protests in the streets. They stirred up unrest, and Mossadegh was chased from power. And the United States installed what the Persian Empire would have called a satrapy, meaning that Iran became a kind of province of the American empire under ultimately CIA rule. That lasted 26 years. In 1979, as the Shah of Iran was dying of cancer, the people led a revolution, an uprising, and threw out Savak and the CIA and the Shah. And that's when Iran had its Islamic revolution and put in the government that is government until today. The United States hated that. When you're an empire, as we are, when you have protectorates, when you have places where you have your military, and in the case of Iran, when your major oil companies have investments there that suddenly are lost because what was stolen from Iran is now taken back by Iran, that led to a reputational question. We need to bring Iran back under our control. We need to punish these people for what they've done.
So essentially what he's explaining there, and remember, this guy, he is not benefiting in any way other than spiritually. His moral standards are being upheld here by just speaking the truth, because he's not the only one that realizes this amongst, prominent figures. Other people realize this. In fact, Ron Unz, who does a brilliant breakdown of, he explains how the majority of intelligence agencies around the world, like he specifically cites in France, where he had an encounter with some intelligence agents there. They know that Saddam Hussein did not carry out. Intelligence agencies around the world know that the American people were deceived and that Israel benefited off of the wars in the Middle East, beginning with the Iraq War, all on the pretense of, by the way, thousands of American citizens died in the attacks. If that was perpetrated from elements within the U.S. government that were placed there by Israel and gained a foothold enough to pull off an attack on our country and force the blame onto their enemies in order for us to send our soldiers, our military, drive up our debt, destabilize our country, our economy, all on the behalf of raising up their country, strengthening their country, providing their country with the resources needed to become the main power structure in the Middle East. And it's still going on to this day, which apparently all of what has happened up to this point is not enough. They want Iran too. Iran happens to be the last bastion in this conquest of Bibi Netanyahu and the Greater Israel Project. In this next clip, he's going to explain what we're seeing in Israel, coming out of Israel, and their aspirations to spread and to push their borders out and expand.
A real form of Judaism for 2,000 years.
It's not what I grew up with at all.
It's not what I grew up with as a Jew at all. It's something absolutely late 20th century, early 21st century. One of the parties is called Jewish Power. And it is the idea that...
That's its actual name?
Yes. In Hebrew, yes. We redeem God's promise to us by becoming Greater Israel. So the act of this expanded Israel is a religious demand upon us. This is our redemption, is this very political military program that we have. And that is Smotrich and Ben-Gvir, which says on a religious basis, we couldn't have a state of Palestine next door. God gave us that land. That's ours. That's part of the promised land. That's not theirs, even though the Palestinian people were living there for well over 1,000 years, probably incidentally, according to some historical studies and interpretations, perhaps Jews who converted to Islam in the 7th century when Islam swept across the Eastern Mediterranean and North Africa in its foundational moments. The Islamic societies, Umayyad and Abbasid caliphates, enabled Jews and Christians to live within the Islamic lands, and to live peacefully and to govern themselves primarily, but to pay a tax. And so as a way to avoid taxes, many people converted. We know this. And probably today's Palestinians, many of them are, descendants from across centuries of Jews who were the settlers, who were living there before the 7th century sweep of Islam across the land. That's a footnote. Even David Ben-Gurion, the so-called founder of the State of Israel, held that view in the 1930s and 40s, calling the Palestinians really the original Jews of the land who probably converted and became the Palestinians.
Yeah, and this is where you get the most there's some recent discussion that the the citizens of Israel are not actually Semites. This is where the Semite discussion comes up, because the Palestinians have been there a lot longer than Israel, obviously. I mean, Israel was founded in 1948. Palestine has been there for a lot longer. And this is why this man is getting persecuted, because he's drawing attention to historical documents. But I just find it fascinating how, in large part, Bibi Netanyahu has been able to subvert our country for so long. We need to pay attention. We need to wake up. We need to start doing our own research. We need to start listening to these people that are getting canceled, instead of listening to this is what I get out of people. They either ain't listening to anything at all, which is not going to help us, or they're listening to the news. And here you go. If you ever wondered where Zionism came from, and from a historical perspective, keep in mind this man has been studying this for longer than I've probably been alive. So
extremely important in the U.S. context to understand the Christian Zionist dimension to this, because Zionism did not originate with Judaism, strangely, or with Jews, I should say. Herzl was encouraged in his Zionism by a Christian Zionist. And Christian Zionism was an evangelical belief that the Jews should go back to make a homeland in the Promised Land or the Holy Land. And that has roots hundreds of years before these Jewish secular Zionists started at the end of the 19th century. And a big part of the Christian Zionist movement started in Britain in the first half of the 19th century. These were Christians reading the Bible, and reading the Bible in very particular ways, one may say, increasingly with an emphasis on the last book of the Bible, Revelation. So what's called eschatology, or the end of the world beliefs. And part of that eschatology, preached by a British preacher named Darby, with a huge effect subsequently in the United States, was that the Jews should go back to the Holy Land so that the second coming can occur. Because the book of Revelation says that the second coming of Christ will occur when the Jews are in control of the Holy Land.
I was posting not too long ago when it first came out about Pete Hegseth talking about rebuilding the third temple and this and that. That was Tucker. Tucker exposed that. Pete Hegseth is on record talking about rebuilding the third temple. So whether you're a believer or you're a skeptic, you have to realize that those in power of our country, they are thorough believers. And that has a lot to do with why we're going into this conflict, why we're deciding to drag our dying, bleeding country economically into another drawn out conflict so that we can build some third temple. And according to their religion, we're going to bring Christ. I mean, this is, I don't care what you think about it. This is what they're saying. They're saying it themselves. This is their words, not mine. I just see it, and I'm trying to share it with you so that you can understand what is actually going on. And it's not aligned with Christian beliefs as well. I mean, just got to add that in there. This is coming from a Jewish man who is by all accounts, in my opinion, he's a morally upstanding person. He realizes what's going on, just like everybody else that's awake. And he has a position, a stature as a public figure that gives him that affords him the ability to speak out and to use his voice. And thank God for him, because without these dissenting voices, we wouldn't stand a chance. I mean, I'm not going to be able to reach people, but Jeffrey Sachs is. Tucker Carlson is. Norman Finkelstein. These people like this they deserve hero recognition.